Welcome to Brown Bagging It from Your Backyard. I'm your host, Harvey Webster, and this is a production of Ohio Native Plant Month, which is now Ohio Native Plants, which you can find at ohionativeplants.org, and Nature in My Backyard. And it has support also from the Audubon Society of Greater Cleveland, the Master Gardeners of Cuyahoga County, and the Shaker Lakes Garden Club. And Nature in My Backyard is an initiative that was started a few years ago to try and sort of connect people with native plants and encourage them to relook at their backyard and start removing invasive species and cultivating native species instead, and creating habitat for a whole range of organisms, including fireflies, which we'll learn about later, in your yard. And get your neighbors to do the same. And together, your garden can make a difference and we can all change the world. And that's not just boilerplate. I mean, we kind of really believe that in these days when things seem to be a little bleak, the place where we can make a difference is the place that no one else can tell us not to. And that's our backyard. By the way, if you are ever predisposed to wanting to support this effort of Nature in My Backyard or Ohio Native Plants, you can actually go to the Ohio Native Plant website, and there is a place called Support, and you can give securely through GiveButter. So we just encourage you. It's not required. It's a volunteer organization. All the teams that go out and make site visits to help people along on this journey to create native habitat are all volunteers. But there's overhead in terms of operating websites and creating websites and doing all of the other good things that we do. So I just throw that out there to support our mission. Think about that. Next month, we are going to have Master Gardener, Master Birder, Master Educator, Matt Valensic, and he'll be returning to Brown Bagging It from the Backyard to talk about good bug, bad bug. And in keeping with the sort of entomological theme of this month, next month, in July, we're going to have Mary Lynn DeFino, who will be joining us to talk about butterflies. So for those of you who like the six-legged organisms, then we've got a lot to provide for you today and in the coming months. And for those of you who enjoyed our Q&A sessions, Ask a Robin with Robin Shashin, they will return perhaps in the fall, but right now Robin is busy making Nature in My Backyard site visits, which of course is what we're here all about. So we are at 59 participants. We are at 12:08. I'm getting started with the introduction here. Today we're going to be welcoming Elijah Crabtree from the Arc of Appalachia. And this is an organization, a remarkable organization that definitely, in the spirit of that quote, I said, this definitely overgives of itself and delivers. Organized about 30 years ago, Arc of Appalachia now has preserved some 15,000 acres of land in the Appalachian heartland, mostly in Ohio, but a few properties in Kentucky and West Virginia. They've got a great mission statement, and I highly recommend you go to their site, arcofappalachia.org. And their mission starts, there once lived a forest, and talks about the greatest temperate deciduous forest on planet Earth that included the Appalachian heartland, the Allegheny Plateau of Southern Ohio. And basically, they say that their work is simple and straightforward: to buy and permanently preserve the best of the best forest communities still remaining in the Appalachian heartland through fee-simple acquisitions and the donation of conservation easements. And they've got some of the best properties. If you go on their website, you'll find a map that shows where they are. Many of them are open to the public, and they've got outstanding hiking trails. And they also do a tremendous amount of fabulous educational programs. Some of them you probably heard about. Some of them are festival-like, things like Mothapalooza, but wildflowers and birds, educational programs on mosses, on fireflies, you name it. Taking advantage of field experiences, immersive experiences on the properties that they preserve. So they're kind of based in that heartland. And Elijah Crabtree, our speaker today, is a product of this heartland. Born and raised in Ohio's first capital, Chillicothe, down in Ross County. Elijah is a naturalist currently, but a former land manager for Arc of Appalachia. And when I was asking him about his upbringing, and was he steeped in the forests of a kid, and did his interest in botany and geology and birds and fireflies and everything else, did this come, as a toddler? And he said, actually, no. In high school, he was much more interested in soccer. But upon graduation, a couple things. He went to Hocking College, and at Hocking College, he found remarkable professors and staff that had a whole range of natural history programs, many of them field-based and immersive. And they had a culture of natural resource conservation. And this just spoke to him. And he started then by getting involved as a volunteer and going on hikes in the Arc of Appalachia system. And that ultimately led to a position. And early on, he was a land manager. He was sited at Tremper Mound, which is Aboriginal mound down near the Ohio River, and the Simon Farm Preserves down in Scioto County. And he was overseeing their development as a management and educational hub. And as of this year, rather, Elijah has taken on a new position with the ARC as an educational specialist. And we were talking about this, and though the main mission of Arc of Appalachia has always been to preserve and conserve the best of the best, and create the corridors and linkages so that you have significant parcels that actually contribute to the preservation of Appalachian biodiversity. But more and more that they recognize they also have a very, very strong educational mission as well, to see these properties used as a way of creating a conservation and environmental ethic in many, many other people, so that they will feel the same way about them as we all will. And we really, again, highly encourage you spend some time, and I'm sure that Elijah can tell us some of the ways that you can engage in the ARC. He describes himself as an avid hiker. He especially loves to spend his free time studying and appreciating Ohio's geology and botany. I presume his 3 dogs, his rescue dogs, come with him. But he's become remarkably proficient in geology, botany, and an excellent all-around naturalist. And I love this description of him. He's got a keen and indefatigable sense of wonder and curiosity. Oh, that we should all have that, a keen and indefatigable sense of wonder and curiosity. It's a great way of describing Elijah, and also a great way of describing the organization he works for, because they're pretty darn indefatigable itself. So speaking about lighting up the night, gardening for fireflies, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Elijah Crabtree to Brown Bagging It from My Backyard. Elijah, you have the floor.
Hi guys, thank you, Harvey. That was a wonderful introduction. Probably the best introduction I've heard. That was very, very nice. Uh, Thank you, Harvey and Jane Ellison, for coordinating this and giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys on this really exciting subject that is fireflies. Um, just to, I guess, add on a little bit to what Harvey said, my name is Elijah Crabtree. I work for the Arc of Appalachia. I used to be a land manager for about 5 years. I've been with the Arc for close to 6. So um, I'm now an Arc of Appalachia education specialist. So that is my brand new position within the Arc as of the beginning of this year. Um, Before this year, I had lived down in Scioto County at Tremper Mound, which Harvey had mentioned. It's a fascinating prehistoric indigenous ceremonial site that the Arc of Appalachia has worked for many years to try and acquire. It's over 700 acres. And when we did successfully acquire it in around 2020, 2021, I was with the ARC. I was working with them part-time. I had been volunteering for them. And so this opportunity came up, and they offered it to me, and I went down south. I moved into a house that's uh, right outside of the Tremper Mountain earthwork. You can see that the interesting earthwork there in the meadowscape. Uh, the house I was living in was just to the right outside of the frame of that photo. So I could see it from my backyard. I spent every single day there, land managing for the 700 acres, tree planting projects, wetland restoration, um, and creating Tripper Mound as an interpretive site. Um, and over those years that I was there, as I started to be exposed to all of the different interesting things, all of the biodiversity that's at this preserve and that's across the southern Ohio, I found myself one summer night getting an invitation from Nancy Stranahan. Nancy Stranahan is the director for the Arc of Appalachia. She is the heart and soul of everything that we do, and she started everything back in 1995. She's been a fantastic mentor for myself, both as just a personal individual and as a naturalist. And so she invited me to go see fireflies at her place at Ridgeview Farm, which is up in Highland County. That's another preserve. Um, and we saw an entire meadow, 150 acres of fireflies with their unique flash patterns all across the meadowscapes. And we came across this really cool thing called a railroad worm. The scientific name is Fangodes. Um, and that hooked me right away. I call them bridging moments. These moments where you really, really connect with a subject or a topic or an area, and you're sold for the rest of time. Um, I intend over the years to try and accumulate all of these bridging moments. Plants and rocks were my first bridging moments. Um, Fireflies was my bridging moment to get into insects. So Nancy Stranahan, the director, she kind of gave me that bridging moment, that opportunity to be swept into the firefly world. With all that exciting knowledge, I went back home to Tremper Mound and I started to look for fireflies myself. That's one of the great things when you're exposed to a new level of biodiversity. Um, you learn something and you're curious yourself, do I have this on my property? Or do I have something else that's not on their property, but's on my property? So you just get sort of this infectious curiosity. And so I began spending every single night going out in the field looking for fireflies. And I didn't have a good frame of reference for what was a spectacular display, what was average, what's below average. But I felt like what I was watching was just, you know, some of the most amazing displays I had ever seen or that anyone had seen in the region. So I had reached out to Nancy and I asked her to check out these displays with me. And she just had her jaw on the floor. Um, she agreed that this was a really special place for fireflies and firefly biodiversity. And so we decided to do programs, and we've been doing programs, inviting people to uh, to Tremper Mound to stay for 2, 3 days. And we do an intensive firefly watching workshop, and we teach people how to identify fireflies. So we've been doing that for 3 to 4 years, and just over the years, I've learned more and more. I've developed more of a relationship with fireflies, and so here I am today speaking to you guys about fireflies as the education specialist. So that was my long intro. Let's see if I can switch. Okay. So start off with the question, lightning bugs or fireflies? I feel like today it's a little bit half and half, but I also feel like not that long ago, everyone was calling them lightning bugs. You can actually look at some regional maps and see how the dialects and the preference between lightning bugs versus fireflies correlates with different areas. Fireflies used to be more of a Western United States term, and lightning bugs was more of an Eastern term, and it still is somewhat, but we're finding more that people are calling them fireflies more often. I personally always call them fireflies. I probably called them lightning bugs when I was a kid, but at some point over the years. I just picked up fireflies. Um, so what are they? Are they lightning bugs or fireflies, or are they either? Um, the names sort of give us some clues, maybe. Lightning bugs. Are they a bug? There are a taxonomic group, an order, um, Hemiptera. They're called the true bugs, stink bugs, aphids, cicadas, moss bugs. Extremely diverse taxonomic order, but fireflies are not in them. I skipped over it, but we can look at a firefly here. Most people don't get a close look at an actual firefly. They usually are seeing this. And so they're kind of just left to fill in the gaps as to what it actually is that's giving off this really interesting light and all of these flash patterns. But this is what they look like close up. Uh, Most people are, I think, a little surprised. But as you can see, they have this hard shell cover over these underwings, these more filmy, thin underwings. And so we see we have some thin, filmy wings in the cicadas here, but we don't have that hard shell covering, that protective outer wing. So if we look at fireflies, the name fireflies, are they true flies? Taxonomic order Diptera. Uh, they are not. We can also see here that they do not have that hard cover over those thin wings, those underwings. Coleoptera beetles. This is, in fact, the order, the group that fireflies are in. So you might as well call them lightning beetles or fire beetles if you want to be taxonomically accurate. And you can see that um, what's what they all share in common is this what we call elytra. It's a set of hard shelled outer wings that actually sit over those thin, filmy wings that fold up underneath. They're the underwings. And so that is the distinguishing feature of beetles, and it's a distinguishing feature of fireflies. As we go back to that photo, we can see the elytra are sort of perpendicular. If you imagine the fireflies flying, but flying standing up, those hard shell coverings, those elytra, are clearly visible there. And then here you have a side by side next to a much larger, very different type of beetle, but also a beetle. And I highly recommend looking up videos. It's very fun. Videos of beetles unfolding their underwings out of their elytra. It is, and there's a lot of really cool slow motion videos. The diversity, the morphology in which these wings are engineered, the way they're folded in and the way they fold out, is it's really, really incredible. And these very, very large bodies that they're carrying, especially you can see that beetle on the right. Beetles, so they're the most diverse order group of insects in the world. And they've been around for a really long time. So, a very, very old group of insects like the beetles, it's expected for them to have, widespread diversity. This is around 290 million years ago. There's a fossil here on the left of a beetle. You can see those hard uh, outer wings, those coverings that protect the underwings, the elytra. You can actually see them pretty clearly here in the fossil. And this is a digital reconstruction of that on the right. What's interesting to me as someone who's interested in geology, this is from the Permian period, which is the Paleozoic era. Ohio's bedrock is made up of all Paleozoic bedrock. The Permian is our youngest bedrock. It's the extreme southeastern corner of the state of Ohio. And you get some really, really interesting diversity showing up at that time. I don't know if we have any beetle fossils. I don't believe we do, but this is around that same time that we have some of our youngest bedrock in Ohio. Here's another really cool, interesting fossil of a beetle a little more vague, but you can see the elytra. Um, Also, I've highlighted here three main segments that also characterize beetles and fireflies. The abdomen, thorax, and head. The thorax, you can essentially look at it as the chest or the waist. Um, yeah. Now, this isn't just an ancient fossilized beetle. This is a ancient firefly preserved in Burmese amber that's nearly 100 million years old. A lot of our insects, a lot of our ancient insects that are no longer here, um, can be found in some of these preserved Burmese amber deposits. A lot of our understanding of some of these insects and different taxonomic orders and of different things is from these Burmese amber deposits. This is our earliest evidence of fireflies ever existing on Earth. You can see they have the elytra, and on flipped over on the underside, you can see that they have lantern segments. So they are indeed fireflies, and they were flying around 100 million years ago in the Cretaceous period, likely flashing or glowing. It's really, really fascinating. So how do they produce light? Um, in those lanterns that I showed you there and the preserved firefly, those are light producing organs essentially. And there's some chemistry going on in there that I won't get in the weeds on, but it's essentially a substrate called luciferin and then an enzyme, luciferase. They have both of these in their light producing organs. And then they expose this to oxygen, and this reaction in turn produces a cold light, which is much, much more efficient than any light that we ever produce, a warm light. Um, there are other life forms that utilize the same exact chemical process to create a bioluminescence. This is Omphalotus, the jack-o'-lanterns. We have a native Eastern jack-o'-lantern, Omphalotus illudens. It's actually pretty common. I see it quite a bit. I saw it last weekend actually, which is pretty early for the year. But I saw it in Shawnee State Forest along a roadside. Um, they typically grow in oak hickory forests, growing out of the bases of stumps. But at nighttime, they emit a sort of a weak greenish glow. And when it's very, very fresh, if you're lucky and you can find them fresh, supposedly you can read a book underneath the mushrooms because they're emitting so much light. Um, all of the ones I found are you can hardly notice that they're glowing, but they are indeed glowing. And it is the same mechanism with the luciferin and the luciferase, just like fireflies. Um, Another beetle, the click beetles, there is a group of bioluminescent click beetles. A lot of them are mostly native to Brazil, but we do have one or some native to southeastern United States. And they actually have light producing organs, spots on the back of their heads, which is really, really interesting. Um, and what's even more interesting is this click beetle that is in central Brazil. Its larvae actually grow and, well, they occupy these huge termite mounds. They come out at night along the margins and the edges, and they glow and just light up these huge termite mounds. And it's not for a defense. A lot of people assume it's going to be for a defense to keep other predators away, but this is actually a lure. So these larvae are actually trying to lure in smaller prey to feed on. So why do fireflies flash or glow? Unlike that larval click beetle, which was luring in smaller prey to feed on, our current modern day fireflies, they utilize bioluminescence solely for adult courtship. Um, At some point, it's probably thought that the larval stage was the predominant bioluminescent phase, and they would lose their bioluminescence as they transitioned into adulthood. At some point in the long evolution of fireflies, adult fireflies started to adopt and retain those bioluminescent abilities um, and into lanterns. And they refined their control of these bioluminescent lanterns over long periods of time. And so here we have the synchronous firefly, which is in Shawnee State Forest, and it's giving out six uh, pulse flashes. Um, it's one, two, three, four, five, six. They're all through the forest here. You can see them in the exposure here. Um, and they're also synchronous. And so not only have they controlled their ability to emit light within flash patterns, um, but they also are able to synchronize with all these other males over a large area, males that they're competing with, by the way, to try and impress a female for reproduction. We still don't know entirely why or how that they are doing this. Um, but it's really fascinating to look and see just how much they've mastered the power of bioluminescence as a communication tool. Okay, so the firefly life cycle. So in that dance of light, in the effort to reproduce, um, two adults, the male and the female, are going to come together to reproduce, and the females are going to lay about 50 to 500 eggs. You can average in the middle of that, but it's usually going to be just on top of the surface or just below the surface of the soils, wherever the habitat they're occupying. Um, Usually, preferably, it's going to be a little more moist. They definitely want some moisture for the preservation of those eggs. And then in about 3 to 4 weeks, up to a month, those eggs are going to hatch into the larva. And the larva, you can see him on the right here, including the eggs too, as you see on the left, they all glow. Um, you'll find that fireflies, not all of them flash or are bioluminescent per se in their adult forms. But in the larger family of fireflies, Lampyridae, all larvae and glow. So that is the commonality that is you can find throughout every single member of that firefly family. But going back to the larva, it's going to spend up to 2 years feeding, getting ready to go into the pupal phase, which will then in turn take them into the adult phase. So this is the most crucial phase of the firefly life cycle. Um, and that's why it's important to learn and understand firefly natural history and their life cycle if you want to participate and help contribute in the larger preservation of fireflies and their greater protection. Um, so yeah, the larvae, they're going to be around for up to 2 years, and they are constantly feeding. They are quite predatorial, and they like to feed on slugs. That is their main food source, which is another very valuable insight as people who are interested in managing for them, what it is that you should look to accomplish. Um, so you want to establish habitat for slugs because that is a fantastic larval food source for them. After those 2 years, after they've fed, um, and after they've pupated, they come out as adult fireflies. Here on the left is a Photinus pyralis. This is one of our most common fireflies in the eastern United States. Um, they have a long glow shooting out from the grasses, low in the low grasses. And then here on the right, you can see these are full of firefly adults, uh, adult males performing their courtship flashes. Yeah, so as I was sort of getting into, to help them, you must know them. And one of the best resources right now is Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs by Lynn Frierson Faust. Um, what I didn't include in that story in the beginning of this presentation about this bridging moment is the fact that I also had this on hand with me as well. Nancy had shared this book with me. Without this book, I'm not sure I would know anything about fireflies aside from the fact that there were a lot at Trimper Mounds. Um, Fireflies, understanding them, exploring this world of diversity has been has not been very accessible to everyone. There's a lot of um, there's still a lot of gaps to be filled in our understanding of fireflies and the different species, how to differentiate between them, what habitats they occupy, where do they exist across the eastern United States or the United States at large. But there's been some very, very dedicated entomologists over the last 100 plus years who have pieced together tons and tons of information, all kinds of data um, on fireflies in the eastern United States. And Lynn Faust is sort of building off of this and has put together this amazing compendium, this field guide on identifying our most common fireflies and glowworms. So if you want to be proactive in protecting fireflies, um, I absolutely recommend you get fireflies, glowworms, and lightning bugs so that you can begin to learn them yourself. Here are Fireflies of Ohio, and this is actually not fully up to date. I think there's 28 here. So most people think there's one species of firefly, but there are many, many, many species of firefly just in the state of Ohio. Um, Now there's probably 30 plus and counting. Year after year, I'm sure there's more fireflies being described by science and discovered and being added to these lists. Across the entire United States, there's over 125 up to 150 species of firefly. So the diversity is really, really incredible. And a lot of these are really common. You can see I've highlighted a list of ones here in yellow. These are ones that I believe are very likely for you to see if you are in a suburb area with a large amount of grass and some good established tree canopy, maybe some forest edge in the back. Um, a lot of these you might see just, you know, off the bat. There's a lot of these that are very, very ubiquitous. Just some basic firefly morphology and basic groups. Our most common fireflies are the Photinus, Photurus, and the Pyractomina. And then there's this one here on the right, Pyropyga, which is a very, very, very tiny diurnal firefly that doesn't have lanterns, so it doesn't flash, and it's out during the daytime. They are also very, very common. These are the firefly types that you can expect to see in your backyard or around your property. Um, and this is a great way, these charts are a great way to differentiate between the different groups. I always start with this as far as firefly education is teaching people how to identify between Photinus, Photurus, and Pyractomina. You can see back on the list here, we have quite a few Photinus and quite a few Photurus here. Um, and a lot of the Photurus are very, very difficult. They do a lot of similar flash patterns. Sometimes they change up their flash pattern, they mimic other flash patterns. They're definitely a big headache for entomologists. But the Photinus are very, very are pretty clear, and they're much easier to identify, in my opinion. Um, and the Photinus includes our most common firefly that you will most certainly see in your backyard as long as you have decent grass height, and you aren't using insecticides or pesticides in your yard. So, to learn more about fireflies, I highly suggest going out in the field and seeing what do you have in your property. If you want to promote and curate your yard for fireflies, it's probably best to start and see what it is exactly that you have. You probably do have at least one, two, or three species that you can easily catch right around dusk into the first hour or two when the sun sets. So and the best way to do that is there's a few different pieces of equipment that I recommend. You can see here on the left. This is Matthew Spates. He is from Cincinnati. Uh, Great entomologist, often with fireflies. He discovered a super rare firefly in Cincinnati, the blue ghost. But we were out in the field together, and he always comes out with a headlamp, and he has a red light filter that he puts on top of his headlamp. So he just has a standard LED headlamp, and just gets a red light filter for it. A little bit cheaper, a little bit easier to use that way. And you can take it off if you don't want the red light. But the red light is fantastic because it helps you with your night vision, so you're not constantly adjusting your night vision. And it's also great for the fireflies as it's less intrusive to their male courtship displays. If you have a big LED flashlight just flooding a field or a forest edge, the females aren't going to be able to see the males. It's not going to directly kill them, but it's going to keep them from successfully reproducing. And those results show, over the years. It might not be an immediate thing, but over the years, when fireflies aren't reproducing successfully, we see numbers drop. So having a red light is very, very important. And then a net, you can see at the bottom, that's a net. Uh, Matthew is always bringing a retractable net. He's had an exceptionally long one. I think extends up to 6 feet or so. And you want that net that's on the end of the pole to be a fine butterfly net, much even finer than a butterfly net, as these fireflies can get very, very small. And it's super easy for them to sneak out. I've had some very frustrating nights trying to catch a particular species that's exceptionally small. And it took me 6 or 7 tries. And then on the right, these are just general questions that you should ask yourself. If you're serious about figuring out what fireflies you have, um, if you answer these questions, that's a reliable way to get a, a certain identification. You can also bring this information to an entomologist or someone that's a little better with fireflies, and they can help you. So these are great standard questions to ask yourself in the process of identification. And then looking a little bit closer, you can see that he has a small Ziploc baggie in his hands, and it has a white backing. We used to put postcards in our bags, Ziploc bags, and that's just to use as a background, so that we can see the firefly, the specimen, a little better. Um, Matthew started buying these bags that had the white backing built into them, which was fantastic. Instead of having the separate postcard you had to slide into there. But once you have that in there, you can take really great pictures of fireflies. You can get their morphology. You can get the coloration of their body and the patterns on their wings. You can do measurements, all without killing these fireflies. You just give it a little bit of tension around the specimen, make sure the bag is taut, and it's the pressure of the bag just keeps them secured and up against the white backing. And then when you're done with them, you can just release them and let them fly away. So we're all about um, being careful and safe and respectful to these fireflies. We're not trying to build a bunch of collections of fireflies with pins staked into them. We just want to appreciate them and get to know them better. and help them in the process of getting to know them better. And I should mention in the right here, I have three, this was last year, I have three different Photinus species, all that were flashing right next to each other. Um, you can see on the one on the very right is very, very small, noticeably so compared to the others. But they all have three very distinct flash patterns. And they all occur at the same time in the same habitat. And so you can knock out three different species, I mean, just in a few minutes. And they're very cooperative. They don't really fight you as far as getting into the bags. Um, so as far as a larger resource to look to, a reference to look to, Firefly Atlas, which is through Xerxes, which is a insect conservation organization. And they've created this incredible website where they have all this educational information on how to document, how to preserve these species. They're dedicated to communicating to the larger public on what fireflies are and how to protect them. But you can go on their website and actually look at a species checklist. So just you can just look at fireflyatlas.org, and they will have all of the different firefly species that you can expect to find in your region. Um, and there's also a map so people can record their observations. You can look if you're in the Cleveland area, you can see if what observations have been made in the Cleveland area, and they'll have them ID'd to species. There will be great descriptions on habitat, their behavior. Very, very informative and a great resource to learn more about firefly diversity. Just to go through a few profiles of our most common fireflies that I highly recommend you try and seek out. This is sort of an exception. It's the winter firefly, and it is essentially here year round. It has no lanterns, so there's no flashing or glowing. They look like big black sunflower seeds, and they like to, in the wintertime, you'll see them hanging in the grooves and the furrows of large tulip poplar trees, oak trees, other large forest trees. And they overwinter there. So unlike other fireflies, they can actually overwinter above ground and actually freeze, and then fall again, be fine the following year. So very, very common. I'm certain people can see winter firefly potentially in their yard or near in their area. Pyractomina borealis. This is one of my favorites. This is the first species that I see, first flashing species that I see in the year. It's the first one that most people see. I saw it about a month ago at Fort Hill, which is where I'm currently residing. Um, and they have this sort of a deep yellowish orange flash up in the treetops. They're hard to catch. I never catch them because they are in the treetops. They do not like to hang out in the lower areas. So the behavior of that is, insightful as to what you need to create the habitat for Pyractomina borealis. You need tall trees. So if you do not have tall trees, an established forest edge, or old ornamental trees, you're probably not going to get Pyractomina borealis no matter what you do to your yard. Photinus pyralis, I had mentioned that earlier. That is the most common firefly, um, sometimes referred to as the all-American firefly. This is the firefly that people remember seeing in their backyards growing up. Um, you might as well call it the backyard firefly because that's that is where most people associate it with. You will see them elsewhere. They're a generalist as far as habitat, and they're very abundant and widespread. But they do fantastic in yards, even yards that are the mowing is pretty, they cut the grass to a pretty short depth. They're just very, very resilient and hardy. and they can tolerate soil disturbances. So they can still successfully complete their life cycle. They could still be in the larval phase and the pupal phase in the subsoils, and still tolerate some disturbances as far as soil disturbances. You can see here on the right that they give this unique J hook flash. They start at the tips of grass blades in a yard or a lawn, or at the top of a plant in a meadow. And they take off sort of to the right or to the left in a swooping motion, and then they ascend as they're swooping to the left or right. Um, and it lasts for probably about a second. Um, and they will fill your yard if you have the right conditions and habitat for it. If you're doing your mowing right, if you have enough moisture in your soils, and if you have enough shade and um, protection from the sun, uh, you will have spectacular Photania spiralis displays. Oh, here you go. Here's a um, Photania spiralis, the Big Dipper, in someone's backyard here. Um, I always think, especially when they're low like this, sometimes they'll be a little bit high, up to head height. But in a low mowed grass lawn, um, they'll do the same J hook, but much lower along the lawn there. And it kind of looks like little bubbles, like a carbonation or something when you're out. That's a random observation by me, but um, just a very, very interesting, unique appearance to them when they're in large numbers. Here's another great photo. This is in a meadow, prairie meadow at one of our preserves in Adams County. Um, and it's just really, really showy firefly. Um, so in addition to the spring treetop flasher, the Big Dipper firefly, um, one of our very first fireflies is the spring four flasher. Um, which we just saw, or I saw with a group that I was with down in Cider County about 5 days ago at Tremper Mound. I don't live at Tremper Mound anymore, but since I've been there for so many years, I was pretty in tune with when the fireflies were showing up. And so I had led a group out, and we waited until it got to near the end of dusk, um, and became completely dark. And we started seeing these flicker flashes in the tops of the meadows, all throughout the meadows. There's a name for it. It's called Cinco de Mayo flicker flash. This isn't the typical flash for the spring four flasher. They have four pulse flashes, one, two, three, four. Sometimes one, two, three. But around the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, they start doing this Cinco de Mayo flicker flash. And that's what they were doing here just 5 days ago in the field with the group I was with. I can't get a photo because it's my iPhone and it's hard to get good photos without an exposure. Another species that will start showing up is Photurus tremulans. Um, this also has sort of a flicker or a tremor, a tremulous flicker. So it's sort of a shaky, flickery flash. And when you have it on an exposure and photo, it actually shows up as little individual dashes. So you can see that flash pattern, that flash train going to the naked eye in person. It looks like just a sputtery flicker flash. But Photurus tremulans, very, very common. It'll start out in the meadows and the fields along forest edges, but it usually ends up coming up into the trees or, into the middle of the night. And they will just light up trees along the forest edges like Christmas lights. Um, we have some exceptional trees at Tremper Mound, and during one of our firefly programs, people would just sit their chairs around this one particular tree as a pin oak, just outside of the house that everyone was staying at. and it was filled with hundreds and hundreds of Photurus tremulans, the Christmas lights. Um, just a really, really showy firefly. And this is absolutely a common one that you can expect to see in your region. And if you have a large enough yard with some forest land or forest edge with some wet habitat or stream habitat, um, this you could have this in your backyard. Um, this is one of my favorites. This is the Photurus versicolor flow glows. The versicolor is a it's actually a group. It's a complex of many, many different fireflies that all look and act very similar to one another. But entomologists are pretty sure that there are a bunch of different species, but they just haven't parsed it out yet. And so we have these sort of unofficial names for them, and we just call them Photurus versicolor. Um, but we also call them the slow glows or the Chinese lantern fireflies, and they're midsummer and they like to be mid elevation along a forest edge, even and down to head height as well. And they will have this long 1 to 2 second glow, not a flash, but a glow that persists. And they usually are dropping down, so usually descending from a higher point to a lower point as they're holding that glow, as you can see in the exposure here. Um, it's spectacular at Tremper Mound, the slow glows are, especially when you're walking along a forest edge and you have 20, 30 of these fireflies, these slow glows, just sort of like drifting or dropping down in front of you with their glows. So it feels like they're floating around you. A very, very interesting feeling. And then actually, I noticed this as I was posting this, but in the exposures are great to figure out what fireflies you have too, because you can see the flashes and have them as records. So um, I was looking up here and I saw this orangish dash flash, and it's way above on the canopy, tops of the canopies. I don't see it anywhere else in the tree canopy, but above it. Um, and it's a pretty noticeable pattern. Oh man, just not with it today. Um, oh, I think my screen was covering the label. I don't know if you guys can see the label, but it's the Say's firefly is what's labeled there. It's a Pyractomina angulata. And that's also a very common firefly. It's actually the state insect of Indiana, which is pretty recent, I believe. I think it was nominated to be the state insect in just the last handful of years. Um, but it likes to hang out above treetops, and it usually does this angled orange flicker flash every 2 seconds, and it usually changes its angle too. It likes to go up and then up and down, and you can sort of see its path as it was moving above the treetops. On the left, you can see a little bit close what it looks like. It's a lot wider, more angular than our more common Photinus and Photurus groups. Um, but this is a great species that's common. If you have tall trees, well-established forest edge, um, this you could have some quality habitat for the Say's firefly, Pyractomina angulata. So this is usually this is peak firefly displays at Tremper Mound. Um, and it really does feel like this, and it is an exposure, and so there is some like a cumulative nature to the photo. So there's a lot of probably over 5 to 10 seconds worth of flashes all stacked into one image. But you can see just how electric and ubiquitous the fireflies are in the middle of summer at Tremper Mound. There's probably 3 to 4 different species, all probably Photurus, which are more active uh, sort of they're more active in the heart of the night. The Photinus are more active early in the night. I wanted to share some other interesting fireflies that you can certainly expect to see in yards and potentially your gardens. They're the Lucidotas and Pyropygas. This is the woodland Lucidota atra, and they are extremely tiny and sort of a dark solid black, but they have large antennae for their very small bodies. These are large flattened antennae, and they're designed to pick up pheromones. This is an alternative to light communication for courtship. So they either never had lanterns or they dropped their lanterns over time. And now they utilize their antennae solely for finding and locating the opposite sex for reproduction. But they have the same exact basic morphology here as well as the other fireflies. This is a really cool one. This is a rare diurnal firefly. It does not have lanterns. Polyclasis bifaria, and it has these bifurcated antennae with really fine, like cilia or spiky appendages coming off of each of the forked antennae. Uh, Really, really incredible, and sort of gives you an insight as to the how they've honed in on the art of picking up pheromones instead of communicating by light. We actually found this last year at Simon Farm, which was a pretty awesome, really, really cool find. It was in the uplands on a ridgetop in open woods. Um, and as I've researched the habitat for this species, it tends to like small openings in woods, which would indicate that maybe this was dependent on old growth forests and canopy gap development. This is a really cool diurnal firefly that's not native to the region. I picked it up on Shutterstock. I think it's native to Brazil, but just to demonstrate the variable morphology in the antennae for picking up pheromones. It feels like fireflies were more common when I was a kid. How true is that? There is some truth to that. That's a question that I get, and I'm sure people ask themselves everywhere. Lucy or Lynn Faust, the one that wrote this book, Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs, she has also received this question on her travels all throughout the world looking and studying fireflies. And essentially, what she says is that there we're clearly seeing a decline in numbers of fireflies, a decline in diversity, but we don't necessarily yet have the abundant data and all of the good information we need to paint a clear picture as to what is happening to our fireflies. Um, but we do know that we are losing them. To what extent, I do not know. To what rate, I'm not sure. But we do know what threats are being posed to fireflies. Habitat loss and fragmentation, urbanization, agriculture, and deforestation contribute to the loss of firefly habitats. Wetlands, forests, and grasslands are all fantastic habitats for fireflies that can host numerous species, incredible biodiversity of fireflies. And we are continually losing these habitats, big and small, all across our landscapes. So that is an active threat that we're seeing year after year. Um, and it's very hard for them to reestablish in these places, especially after they've been developed, of course. Um, Chemical pollution. So we do have a lot of tolerant fireflies that can handle short mowed grass, a little bit of light pollution. But at the end of the day, if you are using any kind of chemical pollution, if you're using a pesticide, um, you're not doing great with your chances to bring back or sustain firefly populations in your yard. I recommend going entirely organic with your yard management, property management, and to the best that you can. Of course, forest edges. If you have a forest edge and you have a bunch of bush honeysuckle, non-native bush honeysuckle or privet, um, you can do more specific treatments. You do a basal bark or a stump treatment, so you could still use some herbicides potentially. But I would go against using any pesticides if you're interested in having fireflies. Um, Light pollution, this is one of the biggest issues that we have. We are filling up our spaces with light, and in places we don't necessarily need light. A lot of times we're sleeping in bed and we have some giant floodlight uh, completely flooding space in the yard or on a forest edge. Um, it's a waste of energy, and there's no need for it. And you can help a lot of different things in the process, including fireflies. You can help them successfully reproduce and be able to, for a male and a female to successfully locate each other. And in turn, over the years, you will see that firefly displays are much larger because the populations are increasing, because they can reproduce. Um, Red spectrum lights are better. Some people like to just replace their lights with red. That's like with Matthew Spates, who I was showed with the head lamp and his red filter. That's definitely less intrusive and less disruptive to their reproductive process. So I would also recommend that if you're interested in just dropping, you know, some of the lighting that's in your yard. Um, yeah, so and then I would also see if you can work with HOA, local community, and see what communities can do about streetlights and business lights and all these other things, all these different light sources that aren't necessarily needed and could go a long way in bringing back this very heartwarming and lovable group of insects. So, what action can you take in your own backyard? Lawn management and planting. I was saying earlier, don't. I would avoid mowing your grass. Um, I mow my grass at uh, 4.5 inches. Some people that's absurdly long, and some people that's just average. When I was at Trimper Mounds, there was a golf course that was directly across the road from me, and they, of course, had to essentially shave their grass to an eighth of an inch and maintain it as an eighth of an inch, and that's with herbicides and insecticides and all these other different pesticides. So the golf course across the road from me was a firefly barren, it was a firefly wasteland. There was not a single species of firefly in the 5 years that I lived across the street from there. And then at my place on the Tremper Mound Preserve, here we had 10 to 15 different species of firefly, all with spectacular displays. So, uh, grass and lawn management is a huge step towards creating a suitable habitat for fireflies. Um, Also, herbaceous perennials, biannuals, some things that are, 3 to 4 feet tall, low vegetation that females can perch on, in order to observe and signal to males that they're interested in reproducing. Um, Again, like I said, successful reproduction is ultimately that's how you're going to bring back firefly populations in your property or in your area. So some sort of native low vegetation is fantastic for that purpose. native plants and undisturbed ground. Of course, uh, our Photinus pyralis, the Big Dipper firefly that I mentioned earlier, um, that is it's more tolerant to disturbed grounds, like I had said. Their larvae and parts of their life cycle occur much deeper into the soil than some of our other fireflies. So they might tolerate your whatever level of disturbance that your grounds and your properties receive, but other species will not. Most definitely not. So undisturbed ground is crucial if you want to maintain or bring back any level of biodiversity that's beyond just the Big Dipper firefly. Um, Also, I recommend not raking and moving fallen branches or logs, or just depends on what your property looks like. But coarse woody debris, uh, fall foliage, all these things that can sit on the force or on the floor, retain moisture and biodegrade over time. That's fantastic for all of these different prey that firefly need to survive in that larval stage. Slugs, snails, worms, all these things. If you're raking your property or moving all of the branches and twigs and um, logs that are, falling on the property, that's that's not conducive to the habitat that's needed for great firefly food. Yep. So I guess I was just repeating what I said there. Yeah, fireflies spend most of their lives as larvae, up to 2 years, and they are often living in leaf litter or under rotting logs or just under the surface of the soil underground, and where they're eating slugs, snails, and worms. So that is essential to create that right habitat for them and avoid insecticides. They kill insects, of course, and fireflies are insects. Uh, don't use slug or snail bait. Slugs and snails are food for firefly larvae. Okay, of course, I said that several times now. Yeah, and herbicides and chemical fertilizers, keep them to a minimum or eliminate them entirely, of course. And then reduce, modify, or eliminate unnecessary outdoor lighting. We got ahead of all of these. Use motion sensor lights. That's a great recommendation that I didn't think of when I brought this up early. Motion sensor lights is a fantastic way to be more efficient with your energy use and not having these lights on all the time. Um, and of course, if you don't want to remove your lights, you could just turn them off every night. You could take that action upon yourself. And create wet habitat. So you can manage habitat that maximizes the retention of moisture and water. But you can also create your own wetlands if you're so interested and motivated to do so. Wet prairies, wet prairie gardens, rain gardens. If you have a stream on your property, um, or if you have some sort of drainage or drainage channel and you want to do an impoundment to create some kind of wetlands, you can bring wetlands onto your property without necessarily having a wetland conducive landscape that you're living on. And wetlands are going to bring fireflies, absolutely 100%. Um, that is where you're going to find wetlands and wetland adjacent areas, riparian areas. This is where fireflies thrive. So ultimately, um, you want to incorporate high levels of moisture, slug snails, good firefly larvae food, and great wetland habitat. So that's all I had. And then I would love to take some questions and talk with everyone if anyone is interested and um, would like to discuss anything else.